Hi, everyone. This is Dennis coming to you live for another amazing podcast episode here with Jason Stain. Before we start diving deep into Jason's experience and opportunities that he's been through, I want to quickly talk about the channel. So, if anywhere all over the place, you can hit like, share. If you like this content, please do that so we can get the word out more about creative financing. Now, creative financing predominantly that I focus on is in real estate. However, we are starting to expand beyond that, and we're having guests on that are focusing in different classes in real estate. Also, we're starting to bring on guests as well that are looking at acquiring creative solutions that is outside of real estate, such as businesses, as well as automobiles, and even water-related sports activities. So, but today we're gonna keep it to real estate because that is my specialty. I buy all over the country, and that's why my guests have properties all over the country. A lot of different laws apply across different areas. So, if you're looking to get into a creative situation, there is a community called Sub 2 that has people in every market. So definitely reach out. Now, if you're watching this on my page, which is Creative Financing, feel free to reach out to me. Just comment below this post. Either myself or one of my administrators will reach out to you and see how we can help you out. With that said, let's get the show started. Jason, you ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show, Dennis.
Can you hear me, Jason? Okay,
Yes,
cool.
absolutely. I can hear you great.
Awesome. So, Jason, tell us a little bit about your background and tell us what you've done before you got into the world of real estate.
Sure. 20 years as an electrician in New Jersey. I hold a New Jersey license. Um, I've done a little bit of contracting on my own for a few years. I've split my time between the union I was a union member, still am active out in the field doing electrical contracting. Along the way, when I was contracting, I ended up working for a bunch of house flippers. Probably around 2015, 2016. Uh, just caught my eye, hey, these guys are buying properties and reselling them, and I wanted to learn how to do it. Long story short, I went to an event around, I think, May of 17. It was the first time I ever went to an event, and was hooked ever since. I went on just a binge watching of podcasts and books and just taking a lot of content in before we threw our hat in the ring. Our first few attempts at wholesaling did not go well. My wife and I both work in we both work at doing deals or worked at wholesaling back then together. You know, a few years into it, we've done a few wholesale transactions, nothing to brag about. We've had some successes, a lot of failures. We did a little house
Yeah.
hacking. We're currently living in a live-in flip right now that we're getting ready to renovate. So we use some owner-occupied lending to kind of jump between a couple of houses. And today, we've done some private money lending. We are finishing our first fix and flip on our own right now. That's actually under contract. Should be sold and closed in July. And we closed on another multifamily with using Sub 2 as the means of purchase.
Wow. So I mean, so you were essentially in the real estate space, and then you started working for investors, and you saw how they were capitalizing on acquiring properties using some kind of structure, whether it was traditional
Yeah,
financing, credit financing, or maybe partnering up with other investors. And you were the person that they were saying, "Hey, I need you to take care of this electric. I need you to run this kind of connections and so forth." And then
yeah,
you
absolutely.
decided
Yeah,
to pursue the world of wholesaling. And I find that wholesaling is sort of like, I have to say, I hate to say it, but it's a gateway into real estate in
it
some
is.
cases. Either you're an agent or you're a wholesaler, right? Now, the difference is that the state of New Jersey, for anybody that's watching, that is in the state of New Jersey, wholesaling was not very common in the state of New Jersey or in the tri-state area. I would say prior to 2013, 2012. In fact, I actually tried to wholesale back in 2012 and was met by a lot of skepticism in central Jersey. With that said, when you were doing wholesaling around 2017, what really inspired you to do wholesaling, and how were you finding properties to wholesale?
So, around 2017, 2018, my wife and I both figured that we didn't really have the capital to go out and acquire, a property. However, whether it's a bank owned property, go to a sheriff's sale, all the generic ways, I guess, that when people hear you're a real estate investor, they think, oh, you go to sheriff sales, or you go on the MLS and you source properties off the MLS. We just we didn't know how to get the financing back then. We didn't quite understand the structure of it. So we figured that wholesaling, like you said, is a good gateway. It's a good way to go out there, learn how to talk to sellers, learn how to source properties organically, go on appointments, make a fool of yourself in front of a seller in a lot of cases, asking things, or coming home and, I didn't even ask them what they owe on the mortgage. Like, we've been down all those roads over the years. So long story short, we went to another meetup, and we met a wholesaler that was successfully, doing deals and was looking to expand into different regions of New Jersey. We became his boots on the ground, essentially, where he was marketing, he was actively marketing, and he would send us on the appointments, and he would help us through the process. I would listen to the phone calls. We would be the point of contact. I would go there, and I would actually just treat it as an estimate. Like when I would go do an electrical estimate, it kind of took the edge off for me, because going through the house, I would just kind of focus on the rehab and not so much on the sale end of it. And then I bring all the data to our partner Jordan, and he would jump on the call with the seller, and he'd finish locking up the contract, and then we would have a contract to market. And he had a very strong buyers list. He still does. And I would handle the dispositions end of it too, where I would start getting involved in running the open house, essentially, where people will come in and just kind of get their contractors to look at everything and go start to finish through the whole process.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the one thing that I think a lot of wholesalers that are going on YouTube and just watching YouTube, which they might be watching this particular channel and just saying, okay, well, I went on YouTube and I learned how to go out and call and get in front of people. What I hear you say, Jason, and that's what I see, your success does get better if you squat up with somebody that's more experienced.
100%.
And Jason's case, he had the expertise of being in a trade that correlates to real estate. Maybe that's not somebody who's watching this video. And I would say is that find out what's kind of like your superpower, and highly recommend that your first deal that you do partner up with an experienced investor, that they walk you through the whole process. Yes, you might have to give away half of your returns or your assignment fee, but at least you'll learn.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that way you're gonna basically get, I would say, free education, and you can continue growing from there, and then you can start doing your own deals. But I see so many wholesalers in our market that really are finding properties, and they are not really experienced in a trade of putting the property in a contract, and as well as not properly valuing the property, repairs, and so forth. And that gets them sometimes into trouble, because if they do a contract, technically they're binded to that contract. Yeah, a lot of times sellers don't really kind of hold them up to it, but if they wanted to, they could. So just a
Yeah,
warning advice to anybody: whenever you start a contract with a seller, I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to get any kind of legal advice here, but you could potentially be in a situation where you have to execute the contract. And if you have no intention to execute the contract, you're looking to sell it, you want to make sure, once again, you have that resource, at least initially. And you will have to obviously share your commission.
One of the things
With
I
that said, Jason, go ahead.
I want to add to that. One of the things that I found is that, like I said, when I used to do estimates and I would meet with a homeowner or a business owner, you're basically going there to sell your services there, or to leave an impression where they want to work with you. So if you're wholesaling and you go to on an appointment, you don't have to know everything about everything. You just really need to, be forthcoming and trustworthy. And people are like, I want to work with this individual. There might be higher offers or whatever, but if they don't get the same vibe they get from you, then it's not going to work. And then to add to the point of the contract, yeah, if you're putting a house under contract to purchase and you have no intentions of purchasing it, yeah, that's definitely puts you in a disposition of not being forthcoming. So it's good to partner with people that are capable of closing or know, real deal buyers that are doing volume in the market. We have some partners that do 20 to 25 fix and flips a year. So I know in total confidence, like their buy box is X, Y, and Z. I don't have to be worried about talking to homeowners in those markets because all I have to do is bring those deals, those contracts to that individual and say, hey, this is what I have. This is in your range that you typically like to buy at. And generally you'll close that transaction. You might have to dig deep, long and hard to get it, but at least you have a strong, buyer in your corner that'll support you.
Yeah. So moving down, kind of down that path, you started with wholesaling, and then you got into a little bit more investor base, where you actually stay in the property. Where
Yeah.
even though that it was your primary residence, and that's one of the things that's been highly recommended, it's called a house hack. Now, there's a lot of different variations of house hack, and by the way, that is a form of creative.
Yeah.
That it does not necessarily require you to use financing that is creative. We'll talk about that in a minute. But house hacking is a form of creative investing, maybe not creative financing, but it's still creative because you're able to buy a property that it needs improvement, and you basically it's your primary residence, so you do have to qualify for, and that's where I think it gets really good, because if you qualify as a first time home buyer in the state of New Jersey, in a tri-state area, or even across the country, there's a lot of programs, and you will always be in a better situation with an FHA mortgage or a first time home buyer mortgage. Now, this
Sure.
is for anybody who's obviously starting out. And what I would say is that if you're a veteran and you house hack, I mean, that's just the icing on the
Very
cake,
powerful.
because veterans, VA loans, they have a lot of programs that are where you can get into a property with no money down. And now, unfortunately, with the rents are being so high, you don't really get the implication or the benefits, I would say, of tax savings and so forth, and appreciation if you rent. So house hacking could be uncomfortable because you do have to live in a kind of construction state,
Yeah.
right? And you have to potentially every year move, and if you have a spouse, you have kids and so forth, it could be
Definitely some
uncomfortable,
challenges.
but it is a form of, yeah. Why don't you talk about what challenges that you
I got
experience
stories.
with
I can
house
tell you
hacking?
some good ones here. So our first purchase was in 2012, after the recession. So, my primary source of income back then was through the union hall. And I mean, it was terrible. There was just not enough work to get me qualified for a mortgage. We had just had our son, my wife and I, and she was staying home taking care of our son. I actually went out of state for about a year and got enough employment or enough length of employment to meet the qualifications to get an FHA loan. And I did just that. I put 5% down on the
Mhm.
duplex. I bought a duplex in Bergen County in Saddlebrook for 300 grand back then, which is like, you would jump on that in a heartbeat these days. So 15 grand got me into a $300,000 property. I renovated the top floor apartment first. So the house was in disrepair, broken windows. Things I call it a plaster disaster. It just everything's from the 70s. But I renovated the top floor first. Got a tenant in there. A gentleman moved in there. He stayed there for 6.5 years. So throughout the entire time we lived there, there's only about 3 months that I didn't actually have rental income during the rehab. A few years later, I renovated the bottom floor. We moved back in there, lived there for a couple of years, and throughout that process, we refinanced out. So that's the key when you're jumping from property to property. If you're going to hold them, you have to force the appreciation to get to 20 or 25% equity, depending on if it's a single family or a multi. Once you get there, you can refinance out of the owner occupied status loan, which is typically an FHA. There are conventional owner occupied products. Then you can go and use the owner occupied status again to go out and buy your next property, 5% down, 3.5% down on a single family. So that's what we did. We jumped into a single family. Now, if you want to maximize the house hacking and not rent rooms out in a single family, which is the other method of house hacking, start with a fourplex, 5% down on a fourplex, force the appreciation, get 25% equity out of it, refinance, then buy a triplex, then buy a duplex, and rinse and repeat, refinancing each time. You can end up with 9 apartments, 9 units by the time you get to a single family house. So, and the lenders will approve that process of 4-3-2-1. If you start with a single family and try to go to a duplex, they won't let you use 5% down because they think you're just trying to invest and use a low down payment to get in there. You have to know the lending parameters. So it's good that we have a good mortgage broker. So he kind of broke it down for us. I do wish I started with a fourplex, but I still own that duplex to this day, and I've been living in this single family that we we didn't want to renovate because of the prices with the lumber from COVID. We just continue to invest in ourselves and our businesses. But we are about to break ground here, so we are looking to move out of here in the next 6 weeks, and force the appreciation out of this
Cool.
place, and move on to the next deal.
And those programs are even available today. So it's not like they're you bought in 2012, 2013, around that time frame when the
Yeah,
market was in a down spiral, and it was past the 2008 crash and so forth. So at that time there was still a lot of foreclosures, a lot of
yeah,
short sales going on. Those programs are available today. In fact,
yeah,
they just were talking about a program where for people who are even don't have that great of a credit, their mortgage to get into the mortgage actually had a smaller rate with somebody who had really good credit. Now there's some great areas to that, and I don't want to get into that here today,
yeah.
but ultimately those are available today, and
I mean,
the
let me,
properties are available today as well.
if I can interrupt you for a second. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, if you think about it, like if you
Yeah,
find a fourplex in New Jersey for 600 grand and you can put 5% down, I mean, where else are you going to find the ability to control a $600,000 asset for 30 grand? Yeah,
yeah. No,
it's an incredible tool.
once you understand that concept, it's really the only challenge at that point is getting tenants that are not gonna they're not gonna stick you and not pay the rent,
That's
right?
any rental.
And
Yeah, I
certain
mean that's
counties,
landlording number one. Anytime you're a landlord, I
right?
mean that's always the name of the game.
Well, I mean, there is good situation, there's bad situation, right? And I think you have to kind of balance. But whenever somebody evaluates a deal, they're not thinking they're going to get a tenant that's not going to pay, right? That's not the model, and
No,
that's why if
we never
everybody
do.
was like that, I don't think we would have people investing in real estate, right? So,
Yeah,
um, I could tell you that here in South Jersey, where I'm based, is that there is a lot of different municipalities, and they literally go by per municipalities on the eviction process. And that's why I personally only buy in certain kind of counties because I know the eviction process there is a lot quicker versus the county even that I live in, right? So in the state of New Jersey, it is county per county. This is stream, nationwide, worldwide. So you got to check what your local municipality is.
mhm,
But that is something that I think that's when you're evaluating your risks and looking into it, that's an area that you should also pay attention to. So we talked about you first doing a house hack, and talk to me a little bit about um, a creative deal that you've done recently,
sure.
or that you've done throughout throughout your journey. Tell us about how you acquired that deal first.
So I could talk about we purchased two properties this year. So we purchased a fix and flip, which was a 55 plus community, little townhouse, about 1,300 square feet, very easy rehab that we bought off a wholesaler. And we acquired that with business lines of credit and credit cards. We
Mhm.
didn't want to go hard money. We wanted to test this system out to see how we can leverage it in the future. So we didn't want to involve like a lender or some other private money lender. We wanted to kind of broke the cardinal rule of using your own capital, but it was really a good trial run. So we use an app called Plastic. And well, let me
Mhm.
rewind it. We went out last year, my wife and I, and we acquired several business lines of credit and credit cards because I still have my electrical contracting business, and my wife has her real estate license. She has a real estate business with that, and we also have our wholesaling business, fix and flip type business, where we've done some business out of. So we acquired different lines of credit and credit cards throughout those business that business structure, and you use an app called Plastic, and what it does is it allows you to connect the cards into the app, and essentially you go and to get a HUD statement from the title company when you're under contract to purchase, and you bring that statement to Plastic. And then what Plastic does is Plastic invoices the cards. Well, in the lines of credit, you just send to the money you just send to the title company. But if you're going to use the credit cards, Plastic will invoice the credit cards. So it comes up as like a regular charge instead of taking a cash advance. So we utilize a bunch
Mhm.
of zero interest credit cards to go out and acquire this deal. I did the rehab out of pocket. It was
Well,
about $32,000 in rehab, and we relisted the property. We're scheduled to close in I think around July 23rd or 24th, something to that effect. And start to finish, we closed it February 23rd. So, it was 5 months, a 5 month process to fix and flip this small townhouse. But what we can do in the future is we can utilize Plastic in conjunction with, say, hard money. So if there's a deal and we're going to use hard money, and I don't want to go into maybe my own savings for the down payment, 15, 20%, whatever, I can invoice these cards. Now I have my down payment. And then I can do balance transfers into zero interest rate cards. What we're finding is these offers continue to come in at zero interest. So we can play this game where we keep our interest really low on our cost of money to enter into a deal, and then leverage hard money and or private money to go out and do future fix and flips. Again, your math still has to be correct, right? You still have to anticipate the rehab and the resale and all the holding costs. But we know that we can utilize these cards, these system of cards, to go out and do more business. So that was one. That was
so I mean, I, let's kind of dig a little bit deeper into that because this is
sure.
interesting form of creative financing. Like I said, creative financing. That's the beauty of it. Is it's creative, right? How are you going to acquire a property, stabilize it, which includes renovation, and disposing it, which means selling, right? So
Yeah.
let's kind of go into a little bit further into your strategy. So you got a bunch of credit cards, right?
Yep.
You obviously had to qualify for those credit cards because
Yes.
um, would you need to have a good credit? You have to have established business. Like, what would somebody that, in
Both.
order to utilize the strategy, would they have to do?
Both of those, absolutely. You can have a little less of like an established business and still get credit if your credit's good.
Hmm.
But having both helped. When we applied, we wound up. I was kind of surprised. We got 9 different accounts, about $206,000 worth of debt that we can utilize or credit, right? It's spread out between 9 different, combination of credit, business lines of credit, and credit cards. Some went under our personal, some of them went under the business, depending on where we applied and who we applied to. But it gave us, I mean, that's a nice shot in the arm. Like you can do a lot. If you're buying in North Jersey, I mean, a $400,000 acquisition, like, and if the hard money lender wants 15% down, you can utilize those cards and get your 15% down and get into the deal, and maybe raise private capital after you acquire the deal, and then replace the capital and then pay your lender back. There's so many different ways you can leverage this if maybe you can't raise the capital right away from like an outside source. So it's
Got it.
just a nice way to acquire more deals without having to worry about, do I have the capital?
Right. So somebody that's watching this, they live not in their own residence, they live in an apartment, maybe with
Yeah.
family members, and they're interested in employing the strategy. What would you say would be their first step to start? They're currently a W-2, but they do have an LLC.
Yeah. I would
Their credit score,
approach.
let's say, I mean, for argument's sake, let's say the traditional credit score today, I think I saw somebody, average credit score with today's economy is around 670. I heard something like that. That's the
Yeah.
average credit score. That's typically, but let's get them like they're at like, 700.
Yeah. I mean, if they're 700 score or higher, which I don't know, I was like in the high sevens. My credit's actually gone down because now my credit utilization is not great. But when we applied, I had a high sevens. Um, yeah, I mean, you just have to apply. Try to get an Amex business credit card, right? Look up different credit unions, look up different
But but
local banks, and see which ones kind of fall into that
but
criteria.
but when it comes to acquiring business credit, can they just assign against their LLC? Do they have to have income
Yes.
coming into the LLC? Like what
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like
You want
like
like
what would you say
you
to that
want to
person?
assign it. You want to assign it to your LLC. That's the route you want to
Okay.
take. And I'm not the expert on how to acquire these business lines. I did pay a company to help us do it, so I saw their process. I can
Okay.
rinse and repeat it again. But there's definitely more to it than what I'm aware of. But yeah, I mean, I've had a business for 10 years, electrical contracting business. So one of the first things I went out and did is I got a business credit card. Now I didn't have an established business, but I knew for sure that I needed to have some sort of credit line. I mean, they started me off with a very small credit line, and then periodically, as I used it, as my credit utilization showed, hey, I pay my credit. I'm doing business a little bit. Hey, I need to raise my limit, and they would raise your limit. And once you have your limits raised, and they see that your credit utilization is good, it seems like you can go out and get more. For a real estate investor that's just opened up an LLC, that's again, as a contractor, constantly there's a flow of money coming in. If you're not doing
Mhm.
wholesaling and there's a flow of money coming in, there might be some more challenges, but it's just like applying for loans. Keep going until someone says yes. I mean, eventually one of these banks is going to say, yeah, we'll do a loan with you. That might not be the best terms, but you can still get the
Okay.
debt. Yeah, credit
And you said
unions,
credit union
local
is a good
banks.
place to do it with.
Yeah, it
Okay.
seems like
And then
yeah, because there's
and
just different parameters that they go by depending on the credit union.
got you. And then when it comes to essentially risk that you're taking on, let's say for example you can pay back, the renovation runs longer, there is a potential a market fluctuation where you can't sell the property. What would have been like your like a backup strategy, or is there a backup strategy?
Yeah. If I couldn't sell this property, and again, a lot of this goes into you have to buy right. If you're fixing and flipping, you have to make sure your acquisition costs make sense. I would just refinance this
When
property.
you say buy right, when you say buy right, are you referring to like a certain amount of
Right.
the ARV, like 60%
Yeah.
of the ARV, 70% of the ARV?
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
what were you with this property?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even remember, to be honest with you. Listen, our acquisition was
Okay,
189, and we're selling it at the high 200s, right? I can't say because we haven't closed it
okay,
yet. Um,
okay, got you.
and I've never been one to do the percentage thing. Like that was always, I'm the person that I have to go there and I have to get like a sense of what, because it's the construction background. Like I always know that I'm gonna be under on my construction costs. So I just get
So
a
do
I just
you
get
do you
a
do
sense of
your
what it's
own?
gonna cost. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Gotcha. So do you do your own construction besides electric work, or do you sub outsource that?
I sub it out. I mean, I'll do a couple things electrically, but I right now I work 60 hours a week with the union. So I don't have the
Hmm.
time to do things that I could do. I mean, I'm very capable. I just, you know what, and it makes you a little bit better, I think, in terms of operating a business, because you don't really want to work in the business. You want to grow the business and then pay people to come in and do the work. And actually, recently, I brought an electrical contractor in to come do electrical work on a rehab on the multifamily that we bought, because I just don't have the time to
Hmm.
get there to do it. And I'm coming to terms with that I can't put my hands in everything, and I shouldn't.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, you want to be a business owner. You don't want to be you don't want to be an operator. I get that.
But to answer
So
your
when it
question,
comes to
I just want to jump back to that credit question. So if I couldn't sell and I had all those credit lines, I would refinance out. I would look at like a DSCR loan, right? If I was in a pinch, maybe I couldn't qualify with like
Mhm.
traditional financing, but there I would refinance out of it and then maybe sell it as a wrap. Let's just stabilize what the monthly layout is, a monthly holding costs, and then look at
Mhm.
other exit strategies that, all right, maybe I end up holding the property for 5 years, but it beats, paying short term debt and losing money and just kind of bleeding money out over time. So that would have been the second strategy. Now the 55 plus doesn't allow, and it's very important to check with HOAs because they don't allow rentals. So I would have to find a buyer, and I would probably just sell it on a wrap at that point, and maybe have some money in the deal, but at least I'm not paying any more monthly holding costs.
Gotcha. Very cool. No, I mean it's a very interesting story. It's not what we call a traditional like sub two situation where you have essentially seller financing, creative financing, so forth. It's really being creative with taking a certain vehicle and essentially stacking that vehicle into multiple different avenues and then deploying that within the exit strategy. That's actually the definition of creative. Very cool. So you mentioned that you have another property. Tell us about that
Yeah.
property.
So this is if we go back to like 2019 or so, we started doing our own marketing, right? So we were still wholesaling, and we were doing some private money loans back then too. We've done a few private money loans with a developer in the area. Um, so what we ended up doing is we started marketing for properties. We tried doing some of our own Facebook ads. We did mailers, postcards, some cold calling, very unsuccessful campaigns. We decided to come out of pocket and spend a few grand a month. Let's see what happens, right? We ran a few Facebook ads. So we ended up getting this lead June of 2021. So it was a three-family in Newark construction, 2008. They're behind on their mortgage, all sorts of problems. So we just couldn't get the seller to sign on a contract, so we could kind of feel confident enough to just move forward and start spending money and pull title and put a down payment. So we offered to do like a lease option in the beginning, which again, this is all before joining Sub Two and really understanding, the language and the contracts that come with all that. But um, we actually decided, we ran title just out of the blue. We said, let's just run title on this. This is 4 or 5 months later. We found out that there was a whole bunch of liens on this property. And our attorney advised us like to stay away, just short sales, just strictly a short sale. So we took that advice and said, all right, let's try to short this. So we brought in real estate recovery group, Matt Marinoff, who's very well known nationwide. Um, so we brought him in. I've built up a relationship with him, between attempted short sales or attempting to work with pre foreclosure leads. And this is like the first one that we actually had on the hook from a pre foreclosure standpoint. So I wanted a pro in there to negotiate the short sale. 14 months later, the bank said no, we won't let you short it. And then I just at that point I'm already sub two, and I pivoted and I said, well, what if we just do this sub two? And the attorneys were like, this is a bad idea. All these liens, you might be underwater. And I was kind of at a loss. I said, you know what? I called Damian Mikowski, and I picked his brain for about 20 minutes. And he said to me, he goes, yeah, people buy things sub two with liens all the time, and here's why. And like I sat down, I'm like, I can't believe that, like all the content I've listened to, all the podcasts, it didn't register with me that that was an option. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Yeah, we're just going to buy this sub two, and here's why." And I could completely justify the acquisition. So the seller was agreeable to this. Um, at this point, his attorney didn't want anything to do with it. He just wanted to be done with the property. His mom wanted to be done with the property. So he just decided, forget about the attorneys. I need out because we're going to lose this house. So we
Mhm.
wound up buying this thing sub two. We brought the mortgage current and we brought the taxes current. And we've been, holding this property for 4 months doing work on it. I actually drove him and his mom over to their new apartment in Queens. They didn't have a vehicle. They didn't have really anything to load up and get their stuff. I basically moved them out. The other thing is with the tenants. We took over existing tenants, so there's a lot of risk in that. And I wound up meeting with the tenants for about 2 hours apiece to really get a sense of who they were and what their goals were, and if they intended to stay or if they wanted to go. What's it going to be like with me as the landlord? And I was very comfortable with them. And that was the thing that kind of pushed it over the finish line for me, because if I didn't feel comfortable with the tenants taking the tenants over, I don't think I would have bought this, because the rental laws in Newark and in New Jersey are difficult to circumvent. So the tenants, fantastic. They're great people, and I'm very happy to have them in the house. So we're doing a renovation in one of the apartments, and one of the other tenants is very eager to get down in the new apartment, and that'll render another unit vacant to us that we can get in there and do work and get market rents up. Given market conditions, we might test the market and list it just to see what comes of it, because it is a great property. It's a great location, and it wouldn't hurt to find out if anyone's willing to pay like top dollar for this property, for this location. So that's kind of where we are today. We're almost done with that rehab there. As a matter of fact, in the next few days, we'll be wrapped up there.
Cool. So, what did Damien tell you about the liens? I mean, I talked to Damien about this plenty of times as well. I think
Yeah.
it's yes, it does happen, but at some point when you have a traditional sale, you do have to address the liens. Is that correct?
Yes. Correct. When you sell or refinance is when. So this particular property has three lien positions. The first lien position is the actual mortgage holder, and there's a silent position attached to that, which was basically a COVID forbearance. And then additionally, there was two loan modifications that were done from when the seller first bought that property. And those silent positions, there's no payments on those positions again until the property sells or is refinanced. So by taking the property over subject to, we're just making payments on the first position.
Okay.
And in the future, if we do a refinance or if we sell, then we'll have to clear the rest of the liens. But at the
Right.
moment, unless there's a due on sale or something like that comes up, we don't have to really do anything with the liens. And Damien pointed that out to me, that it is fairly common, and in a lot of cases, you really won't have any problems over the long term. So we
So
felt
we
it was
actually
doing.
we actually have addressed the due on sale clause because that's a potential, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't happen a lot, but it could happen.
absolutely.
And due on sale clause is when the property essentially um, is transferred,
Yes.
and the mortgage company wants to get, or the lender that's in the first position wants to get paid the full amount that's due. One thing that has been very effective, one of my friends, he's doing what's called a trust.
Hmm.
So he puts the seller in a trust with himself, and they attach LLC to it, and then they do what's called an operational agreement where they outline the control. So at any point, he can actually cash out the individual seller. It's like, and it seems to be a workable solution. Now, once again, whenever you're watching this,
Yeah.
please check your local laws, because we are in one of the most restrictive places when it comes to real estate. That is here, New York, and
Yeah.
California predominantly. Those are three states. I mean, I would say majority of the Northeast, and I would say West Coast, like California. Those states are always dealing with challenging real estate laws. They also have friendly tenant laws, which means that
Yes.
eviction process for landlords takes longer, and it also takes, I would say, time to get tenants and making sure that they're qualified tenants, right? So you mentioned something about your tenants. You spend 2 hours. Just curious, what kind of question, like how did you get a feel? 2 hours is a long time spent with a tenant. I never
It
spent
is.
2 hours with a tenant, so I'm very curious to hear, like,
Well,
what was that
it,
conversation
it
like?
it's weird because you come in there and I guess the preconceived notion from the tenant is that, oh, here comes the landlord, it's going to jack my rent up. Now Newark has rent control,
Right.
so I can't legally I can't go in there and just say, hey, I'm raising the rent, take it or leave it. Now there are people that try to do that, but they really run the risk of ending up in a lawsuit, and they will lose. They're not going to win. So I wanted to go in there and kind of set
Mhm.
the expectations. Hey, listen, this house needs some work. It's been neglected for a while. If I don't come in here and do this, really the bank's going to take this property back, and I don't know where you guys are going to end up. So, one of the tenants was Section 8. So the voucher goes up to top rate when she relocates to the new unit. That's a plus for us. She gets a new unit. She's disabled. Like she doesn't get to have to deal with stairs anymore. Like it's a win-win for both. What she wanted to make sure was that I wasn't booting her out of the house. Which again, I made it clear. I legally can't boot you out of the house. Like you'd have to leave willingly. And I'm not here to do
Mhm.
that, but I am here to run an operation, a business here out of this property that one, I can maintain the property. And the only way to do that is to make sure I'm collecting fair market rent. And I want to provide a
Mhm.
good place for you to live. So all those checks and balances. And then we just kind of got to know each other. Again, I've been dealing with the seller and for 20 months at this point. And he's very close with the tenants. So when he brought me on, it was like, hey, this is a guy I've been working with for a long time. So the relationship is very different than just being there, once or twice and only, communicating for a few weeks and the transaction's over. The other seller, I'm sorry, the other tenant, he's actually looking for a place to live for himself. He's actually shopping, it'd be his first purchase. So he had a million questions for me that was related just to how do I go out and do this? And, we kind of just got to know each other in that respects. And
Mhm.
I cut him a break on the rent because he is trying to buy a house. And I said, in a year we'll revisit this if you're still here. But if you're really trying to go, I'm happy to help you. So the respect is there, and he takes good care of the place as well. So in order to
Got it.
be comfortable taking over tenants, you got to know who's there,
Absolutely.
especially
I actually think
especially
that's a
when the
very
laws, especially when the laws aren't in the landlord's favor. So
yeah, they're against you. Yeah, they're against you.
absolutely.
Um, when it comes to the tenants, um, from your perspective, and you said that the landlord was very close with them, how come he got it to his place? Like, I mean, you've been talking to him for a while. Is there a medical issue? Did he lose his job? Like, how long did he own the property? Like, what happened?
So the property was built in 2008, and it was actually a purchase with him and his ex-wife and his mom. And I don't know the logistics to how that was structured then, but at some point they fell behind. And I think his mom
Mhm.
took like the head ownership of the property because I think she had a solid job, but they fell behind. She couldn't make the payments, and a couple loan modifications. They got caught up, another loan modification, and they fell back behind. You know, that whole story, how, we've seen that a bunch of times where people just, they get caught up, they fall back behind, something comes in. So at some point they just realized they couldn't make the payments anymore and they just stopped. And, as you know, with COVID and the foreclosure process in New Jersey to begin with is a long process. I mean, in 2017 and 2018, we're talking to potential sellers that are in pre-foreclosure that are still, default from, 2010, 2011. So it's New
Yeah,
Jersey takes a very long time to process these foreclosures. And then with the freeze on the foreclosures, they were kind of just buying time to figure out, hey, what are we going to do?
Right. Did you did you end up paying them anything for getting them out of the property? Was there any kind of cash for keys for the sellers? Was
Yes,
there potentially maybe a moving charge?
there was. So what I did is they were asking for a certain dollar amount, and I said, I'll give you. I think it was 33,000, something to that effect. And I said, I'll give you 33, provided X, Y, and Z check out. And there were certain things that, as we got through the closing process, that came into play. That, like, they didn't pay a water bill. There was something else that came in that was a significant upcharge. And I said, any of those fees, all that stuff is going to get deducted from the 33. So what it essentially did is it capped myself on the entry into the deal. So this
Mhm.
was my entry into the deal. Everything else is deducted from your share of the money. And I did not. I broke another cardinal rule here where I let them stay. His mom stayed in the property after we closed because she was trying to get an
Mhm.
apartment set up. And we set a hard deadline, as I want to say it was like the 10th of April. And I said, anything after the 10th of April is a daily rate. And that daily rate is, I think it was like $54 a day or something. And she actually lingered 25 days afterwards. And I called up her son and I said, listen, you know, the top floor tenant wants to move down to the bottom floor. I need to get started in your apartment. You're really holding things up for me. Like, it's been 25 days. Like, this is eating away at the balance here. And that weekend they got their stuff together and they left. And I got them paid out,
Mhm.
and the rest is history. So, again, had I not known them for as long as I have, I may probably wouldn't have did that. It was still a risk. I could have said, "Hey, we're not leaving. We're going to stay," and there's really nothing I could do about it. But
Yeah,
I
you would
felt
have to
I
go through the
felt like
eviction
they were.
process, and then
Yeah, it was a real judgment call. I mean, and how do you win an eviction process when they have the debt in their name and I'm saying I'm the owner? I mean, it's just, to me, I don't see a victory there. So I took a big risk
right.
there.
Yeah, and and the reality is, a lot of times when I hear people talk about this, it's always that common. I had to take a risk, right? Sometimes risks are calculated, and sometimes they're not, right? And I think in this case, to some extent, you did have some trust of the seller, the previous owner. You build that relationship over time, and I heard somebody say this recently. Everybody thinks in their mind that people are going to be like we are as far as
Yeah,
ethical and so forth, but that sometimes is not the case, right? Which but it did work out in this situation.
yeah,
So you're going to fix up this property. You're saying that you might want to put it on the market. Now, if you put it on the market, you're going to essentially just get the spread. You have to pay off the mortgage and
yes,
whatever the spread that you get. So to some extent, it could be classified almost like a novation, right?
or even a
To
sub
some
sale, right?
extent,
Might
I guess.
fall as a
If
sub,
you right,
right?
right.
Maybe even
If
a
you
sub.
decide to sell it, but I mean,
Yeah,
if you hold it over time, then it's a strict and there's a mortgage in
sub
place,
sale.
so it's a subject to situation. Very cool.
Yes,
Very cool.
yeah. It's
So
our first,
somebody that is listening
it's
to
our
this,
first sub two deal. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dennis.
very
No, this is our
so
first
somebody
sub
that's
two deal.
watching this, very cool. So somebody who's watching this that's brand new to real estate and they watch 49 minutes, what would you say to them as far as getting started and maybe not going into wholesaling first, but they do want to get into either a house hack situation or even a creative situation? What should they do?
Well, I would say if you're house hacking, you're going out and getting conventional mortgages. So you have to have a W-2 to get there. Your DTI has to be good. So all the criteria you need to get a mortgage, you have to check all those boxes. You can get a DSCR loan, but that's an investment grade product. That's not for first timers. I would say no. But as far
Right.
as
And just
wholesale,
real quick, just real quick, the DTI, it's debt to income ratio. So
Correct.
how much you basically owe your assets to some extent versus your liabilities, but we'll say it's like how much debt you have, which is technically
Correct.
your liabilities, versus how much income you bring in, and that's what Jason was talking about. I just want to make sure that some people might not
This is
saying
true.
everybody, but sometimes people might be confused with that.
Yeah, and that's the metric
Please
that
go
the
ahead.
lenders will use to approve you. They'll say, "Hey, what do you make? What's your debt?" So if you have a $800 car payment and you go buy your first house, you may want to consider getting rid of that car. Go buy that house, and then hey, cars aren't going anywhere, right? So I mean that stuff like silly things like that can affect your ability to get a loan. So it's about figuring out what your target is. As far as wholesaling is, I mean,
Yeah,
wholesaling's tough. You're relying on a seller to be agreeable to sell at a discount, and you're hoping that the buyer you're working with is actually capable of closing. There's ways to kind of weed out the people that are maybe not going to buy. Like taking an earnest money deposit at close of the inspection period. But it's a tough thing. I think partnering with a wholesaling operation that is successful in doing multiple transactions would be the better way to go if you're going to get into it. You'll learn a lot. They're paying for the marketing. You're going to get the opportunity to get in front of sellers. You're going to learn just the whole process of closing a transaction. Um, that takes a while just to get to that point.
and the reason why I say wholesaler because every creative opportunity starts with a wholesale opportunity. I mean,
Yeah,
in most cases, you're going to have a situation where cash deal just doesn't work. The seller is not comfortable, or maybe they just want more money, and that's where a lot of people are trying to essentially not say beat them down, but kind of get them down to that price so that they can have profit to actually assign and sell to an investor that's going to either fix and flip it or buy and hold it for an extensive period of time. This is where creative comes in because
yeah,
by doing creative tactics, having creative conversation, strategizing creative, where sometimes you actually might even pay over asking of the seller, right? We've seen that, but they have to be open to the terms that you are structuring the deal. And that's really where it comes down to.
yeah, and a lot of
Jason,
that
thank you.
and a lot of that comes with knowing your audience. Like if you're talking to sellers, know who you're talking to, know what they're looking to do. Don't assume that they're going to accept 50 cents on the dollar. If they're not going to
Gotcha.
accept 50 cents on the dollar, and someone told me this a long time, if you're not embarrassed of your offer, it's probably not low enough. Because a lot of times you'll put someone under contract and you just can't get it. You just can't get it sold because the numbers don't make sense. So, make an offer that you're confident that could actually close, or otherwise don't, try, especially for pre-foreclosure, because they're at risk of losing their house. So they're relying on you to get the job done.
Yeah, yeah. You're dealing with people's emotions. You're dealing with people's lives potentially here. So
Yeah.
absolutely, and homes. It's a requirement for standard of living in at least in North America. All right, Jason, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm going to ask you 3 random questions. We're going to wrap up here.
Sure.
By the way, this was a lot of value, and if you liked it, please share this. Um, please make sure that you comment as well. We're going to continue putting these out weekly. So 3 questions. Question number one: if you can sit down and have dinner with an influential figure, current or past, who would that be and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, Probably Warren Buffett. And I would just want to, I just want to understand his approach to like choosing a company. Just, just to see that in person, understand that, or hear that in person. Which he's probably said it a million times, and I've read a few books that he's been involved in. But it'd be great to do that lunch at Friendlies that he does over there in Omaha or whatever it is.
Hey, you never know. He might be in sub two at some point. I mean, this thing is just growing.
Yeah, it
Question
is.
number two: if you can travel anywhere in the world, where would you travel to? A place that you maybe haven't been to yet.
Um, that's a tough one too. I would say probably probably Alaska. I'd love to see what's that looks like out there. That whole countryside. It's just natural.
Love it. And question number three: if you can get a superpower that would be good for humanity, what would that be?
Oh, that's another brain buster. Just being able to share like the joy of like having like the ability to help people, like something to that effect. I think that's a superpower where when things aren't going well, like on a job site or something like that, and you kind of come into the crew and you're like, hey, it's not so bad. Here's why, and everyone's kind of smiling after that, and that's you bring that anywhere. I mean, that's a superpower.
Love it. Great answer. So tell everyone here how they can get a hold of you. Where can they follow you? Maybe a YouTube channel, Instagram, whatever you want to share. The floor is yours.
Sure. So I recently created a YouTube channel for Jason Buys Houses NJ. So I have a carrot site. It's jasonbuyshouses.nj.com. You can also find me on Instagram at j_stain, my last name. And I mean, I have a Facebook page. It's just my full name, nothing special. You're welcome to hit me up and ask me questions anytime. Something I do, I neglected to mention earlier is there are wholesalers in the marketplace that are starting out that they reach out to me. They ask me a lot of questions. I try to bring a lot of value to them, and I've jumped on the phone with their sellers and tried to help them, work things out. So, if you're having a hard time and you're like, hey, I just, I need some assistance, I'm happy to lend a hand and see what I can do to help you out.
Love it. Thank you, Jason, for coming on. I mean, I think people are going to watch this and get a lot of value, especially your credit card strategy. I think there's going to be definitely somebody's going to say, you know what, I definitely think that this might be my path to get into real estate. So I'm hopeful that whoever watches this video will definitely take advantage of it. The other thing that I will say is that you just got to take action. You know,
That's it.
whatever strategy that we talked about today, like uh, our mentor, my mentor, talks about you cannot be on a sideline. You have to jump in the pool and swim. So just take action.
Yep.
That's all I can say. Thank you
Make
everybody for
mistakes.
joining, and have
Thank
a
you,
good
Dennis. Thanks
rest
for
of the
having me.
day. And thank you for coming on. And we'll see you next time on the Real Estate Investor podcast in a creative space. Take care, all.
Take care, everyone.